The Man in the Iron Mask, 1998. Who was the real-life person who the character D'Artagnan was based on? What did the studio MGM discover when they analyzed the audience for this movie? Who was the Man in the Iron Mask in real life? These and more questions will be answered on
Back Look Cinema, the podcast.
Yes, Raoul is my reason, but not in the way you think. Once all of us believed in spending our lives in the service of something greater than ourselves. Aramis had his faith, Porthos his lust for life, D'Artagnan his devotion, and I had Raoul. But we all had a common dream, that one day we would finally be able to serve a king worthy of the throne. It was what we dreamt, what we bled for, and what we have spent a lifetime waiting to see. I taught Raoul to believe in that dream, and now my son is dead. So I'm here to find out if his life was in vain. And the only one who can answer that question is you. Hello, my name is Zoe. It's spelled Z-O or Z-O for those of you outside of the U.S. Welcome back, friends. This is the 228th episode of Back Look Cinema, the podcast, where we take a look back at the movies of yesteryear, especially the movies of the latter half of the last millennium. If you like what you're about to hear, then please tell your family, tell your closest friends, but not just any friends, the friends to whom you've pledged a blood oath to. Your ride or die friends, the friends who mean it when they say all for one and one for all. Tell them about Back Look Cinema. Admittedly, The Man in the Iron Mask isn't a movie that I have a whole lot of nostalgia for. I'd only seen bits and pieces of it, and this is the first time that I've watched the whole way through. I've always loved The Three Musketeers, and I was eager to check out this film in its entirety. This movie didn't have a lot of trivia associated with it, so it gave me an opportunity to front-load this episode with some historical facts associated with this film. The Man in the Iron Mask isn't a direct sequel to The Three Musketeers. There are 3 books in what's called the D'Artagnan romances, The Three Musketeers, 20 years after, and The Vicomte of Bragelonne, 10 years later. The last book is a massive volume of 268 chapters. So, when it's translated into English, it's usually broken up into 3 books. The Vicomte de Bragelonne, Louise de la Vallière, and The Man in the Iron Mask. The written adventures of the Musketeers are so massive that making the Three Musketeers movie and then making The Man in the Iron Mask is like adapting the first and last book of a 5-book series and skipping all the adventures that connects the books together. That being said, this movie isn't a sequel to any of the Three Musketeers films that came before it. It stands on its own as a more dramatic and serious presentation that does away with some of the campiness that usually found in Musketeer movies. The Man in the Iron Mask is a standalone film loosely based on some elements of Louise de la Vallière and The Man in the Iron Mask, which themselves are very loosely based on historical events, and many of the characters are based on real people. For example, D'Artagnan is based on Charles de Batz de Castlemore D'Artagnan, also known as Count D'Artagnan, who was captain of the Musketeers of the Guard under Louis XIV. Other real people include His Royal Highness King Louis XIV, aka the Sun King. He is considered one of France's greatest rulers, and he maintains the verified record for the longest uninterrupted reign of any sovereign monarch in history at 72 years and 110 days. There are some elements of his affair with Louise de la Valliere that were major plot elements of the Dumas novels. Although in the film her name was changed to Christine. In both the novel and the film, Raoul, Anthos' son, falls in love with Christine/Louise character, but the king likes her too and takes her for himself. Obviously, Raoul isn't a real person. In real life and in the novel, the king's secret love affair with Louise was mutual, but in the film, it's more like an abusive relationship with the Louise/Christine person never really loving the king and never actually stopped loving Raoul. The Man in the Iron Mask was a real person who was imprisoned by Louis XIV, whose identity has never been established. In spite of centuries of research, no one ever found out who the Man in the Iron Mask really was. The warrant for his arrest on July 19, 1669, was for Eustache Duger. He was held in various prisons for 34 years until his death at the famous Bastille prison on November 19, 1703. The name on his death certificate was Marchiali. Because of this, he had been speculated to be Italian diplomat Ercole Antonio Mattiali. He's also been said to be a Marshal of France, the Duke of Beaufort, or the son of Oliver Cromwell. It was famed French philosopher Voltaire who claimed that the prisoner was the illegitimate older brother of Louis XIV. There have been more than 50 people speculated to be the Man in the Iron Mask. There are some, considering the intense secrecy surrounding the prisoner, that suggested that the prisoner was the king's own secret twin brother. It was this legend that Dumas based his novel on. The Man in the Iron Mask is a very romantic-sounding title, but in reality, the only reason that we refer to the mask as iron is because it was misreported by Voltaire as an iron mask. In reality, the man wore a mask of black velvet, and he didn't wear it all the time, only when he was being moved from one cell to another or one prison to another. The man in the black velvet mask just doesn't have the same mystique surrounding it, does it? So those are a few of the historical facts that I have found doing my research for this film. Mainly because Alexandre Dumas, in his novels, he liked to do like historical fiction. He really enjoyed putting real life people in his narrative. So a lot of the people in many of his books are based on real people. Also, given that this film is French, I am going to mispronounce a lot of names. You've probably heard that in my reading just now. So bear with me as I struggle through these French names. Many of these passages will be recorded over and over again and edited down so it sounds halfway decent. So that is what I'll say in my defense. And now we shall continue with the opening credits for The Man in the Iron Mask, 1998. The men once renowned as the Three Musketeers in 17th century France led very different lives after their retirement from His Majesty's service. Anthos is living in quiet retirement in the countryside. Aramis became a bishop seeking a closer relationship with God and retains a close friendship with Porthos, who owns a brothel. Anthos' son, Raoul, is preparing to marry the love of his life, Christine, but it seems that the young King Louis XIV, who really could have any woman he wants, also has eyes on her. The machinations of the king against Raoul brings Anthos in conflict with His Royal Highness. With Anthos are Aramis, who also has his own designs against the king, and Porthos. With King Louis stands D'Artagnan, captain of the Musketeers, former friend of Anthos, Porthos, and Aramis, and reluctantly loyal to the King of France. D'Artagnan deals with his internal conflict over his duty to his king and his loyalty to his past comrades. And Aramis has a possible solution. Just replace the king with a kinder, gentler lookalike. Aramis knows exactly where to find such a person. Such a person may be found in a prison with their identity hidden. Such a person may have their face hidden behind an iron mask. This movie was released March 13th, 1998 by United Artists. It grossed over $56 million in the US and Canada and over $182 million worldwide on a reported budget of $35 million, which means it did pretty good. If we adjust it for inflation, that would mean that it grossed over $114 million in the US and Canada and over $372 million worldwide, and its budget would have been $71 million. So I think that's pretty cool. This movie was starring Leonardo DiCaprio. He played King Louis XIV and Felipe. You might have seen him in Inception, Titanic, Django Unchained, Blood Diamond, and The Quick and the Dead. And I've seen all of these movies, and these are well-regarded movies. I enjoy these movies, and I like Leonardo DiCaprio as an actor. And I hadn't seen all of his movies. As a matter of fact, I'd probably say that I've missed most of them. But the movies that I have seen him in they tend to be fantastic. He has a knack for picking great films, and he is great in them. Jeremy Irons plays Aramis, and you might have heard his voice in The Lion King from 1994, or seen him in Die Hard with a Vengeance, or Kingdom of Heaven. Another very renowned actor, Jeremy Irons, even though a lot of times he doesn't care what he's about. Well, I'm not going to say he doesn't care about the movie. I'm pretty sure he believes in projects, but he's been in some duds. John Malkovich plays Anthos. You might have seen him in Being John Malkovich, In the Line of Fire, or Red. That'd be Retired Extremely Dangerous. Interesting thing about John Malkovich is that he doesn't, like, he could be menacing, basically being the same person. He can be, like, in the movie In the Line of Fire, he was the villain, and he was menacing as the villain, but having that same demeanor in The Man in the Iron Mask, he basically has the same demeanor, and he's not as menacing in The Man in the Iron Mask. He's not meant to be, but he is somewhat threatening. It's like within him is a quiet rage. Gérard Depardieu played Porthos, and you might have seen him in Cyrano de Bergerac, 1492, Conquest of Paradise, or Green Card. And at least for a while in the 90s, he was talked up a big deal. He's a French actor. He's one of the few French actors in this film actually speaking with a French accent. And it is, I think the interesting thing about him is that for a little while, he was supposed to be like this big American star. And then he kind of disappeared, I guess, like going back into French cinema. Gabriel Byrne plays D'Artagnan, and you might have seen him in The Usual Suspects, End of Days, or Heredity in more recent times. Also a very interesting person. This is a name that I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce, but I'm going to take a stab at it. Anne Parillaud. She played Queen Mother Anne, and you might have seen her as the Femme Nikita in La Femme Nikita. She's also been in Innocent Blood or Map of the Human Heart. Also, she was a very well-renowned actress, especially in the 90s. Judith Gautrecht played Christine, and you might have seen her in Overnight, The Spanish Apartment, or Ridicule. Edward Atherton played Lieutenant Andre, and he's been in Carolina and Relative Values. Lastly, we have the young Peter Sarsgaard playing Raoul, and you might have seen him in Shattered Glass or Garden State. This movie was directed by Randall Wallace, and he hadn't directed a whole bunch of movies, but you might have seen some of them, such as Heaven is for Real, Secretariat, and We Were Soldiers, which he also wrote. It's interesting that he has directed some very decent movies, but does not have like an expansive career as a film director. He's directed like many TV shows, but doesn't have this huge list of movies that he directed. It was written by Alexandre Dumas and Randall Wallace, the director. Obviously, Alexandre Dumas is credited because it's based on a novel, The Vicomte de Bragelonne, 10 years later. Specifically, the elements of Part 2, Louise de la Valliere, and Part 3, The Man in the Iron Mask, that I mentioned earlier. And he's a celebrated Black author whose given name is Alexandre Dumas David de la Pailletre. Obviously, his most famous work, The Three Musketeers, has been adapted into film a multitude of times. There's currently a very ambitious French production that's attempting to produce a massive 3-film trilogy of the famous novel. The first was released in 2023, the second one in 2024, and I'm not sure the status of the last chapter of this Three Musketeers film trilogy, but looking at the box office numbers, it doesn't seem like it's doing well. I actually wanted to see this movie. But I can only bring myself to watch it if they finish all 3 of these movies, and then I can try to find them whenever they're ported over to the U.S. Alexandre Dumas is also responsible for films based on The Count of Monte Cristo, The Man in the Iron Mask that we're talking about now, The Corsican Brothers, The Countess of Montserrat, La Reine Margot, or Queen Margot. And many of these books have like multiple films that are based on his work. Dumas's father was a famous general who served Napoleon in the French army. He was the first person of Afro-Caribbean descent to attain the rank of general in France. That's Thomas Alexander Dumas. The writer Dumas overcame both poverty and racism against his mixed race heritage of being part Black and part Caucasian to become a world-renowned author and playwright. As for Randall Wallace, he's written Pearl Harbor, Braveheart, and I think I want to make a note that he created this short-lived show called Sunny Spoon, starring Mario Van Peebles and his father. And I really wanted that show to last. I probably watched every episode. I think it only lasted a few episodes, but I'm so sorry that wasn't a successful show. The music was composed by Nick Glennie Smith, and you might have heard his movie. The music was composed by Nick Glennie Smith, and you might have heard his music in The Rock, Fire Down Below, Highlander Endgame, We Were Soldiers, Ella Enchanted, or The Secretariat. So that's it for the opening credits, and now we go to our favorite parts. As for the themes of this movie, we got themes of friendship, loyalty, duty, and honor. All the things that are kind of throughout Alexandre Dumas's books. You see a lot of these themes over and over again. And it's hard to expound upon that. It's like, I feel like this is always what these movies or what these stories are about. The book that the movie is based on, as I mentioned earlier, is The Vicomte of Bragelonne 10 years later, and is named after one of the main characters, Raoul, son of Anthos, one of the three Musketeers. Raoul is the Vicomte, or Viscount, of Bragelonne, because his father, Anthos, was a count, although they don't expound upon that in the movie. While Raoul has a larger presence in the book, he has a very small role in the movie. Raoul is more like the motivation for why the Anthos, and by extension, the rest of the Musketeers, do what they do. The book is very complicated, and it would probably work better as a TV series. For example, in the book, the king has two brothers named Felipe. For some reason, it kind of doesn't make any sense. I think part of the reason is that one of the legends that developed about the man in the iron mask is that he had a younger twin brother. Well, a few minutes younger. Or he had a secret twin brother, a secret identical twin brother. And for some reason, that twin brother was named Felipe. And then the king has a real life brother named Felipe. Like, he's Felipe the First, Duke of Orleans. So I'm not sure how to make that make sense. It could be that I should have looked up his story, but it could be that Felipe, the real life brother of the real life king, maybe was born under a different name. But then when he gained the title of the Duke of Orleans, he changed his name to Felipe. I should have looked that up. That's probably the reason why. But that's the one thing that makes the book complicated, is that the king has two brothers named Felipe. And that could cause problems. That's one of the reasons why I think in the movie they changed the name Louise to Christine. In real life, the king Louis, Louis the 14th, had a secret lover named Louise. And obviously these names are very close together, so I think that's why in the movie they changed the character's name to Christine. I think the film did a great job of simplifying the story. Along with the book being very complex, the people who made the film really wanted to simplify all of the machinations that were going on, while at the same time maintaining some of the motivations behind all of the main characters. And I think they did a really good job of doing that. They also crafted a story so that the three Musketeers would come off as noble instead of kind of selfish. Like in the book, the three Musketeers, they're not necessarily villains, but they do come off as kind of selfish and self-serving. So, for example, Aramis in the book, he's ambitious. So he's he's a bishop, and he finagles his way into being the general of the Jesuits. And ultimately, he has his eyes on being the Pope. And when he conjures this scheme of replacing Louis XIV with the man in the iron mask, he's doing it for his own ends. He's not doing it necessarily to be noble. He wants to be able to put somebody on the throne that he can control. That was kind of his motive. And it's very selfish. He's not doing it for the people of France. He's very much doing it for himself. And that's one of the main changes that they did in the movie, where they made Aramis more noble, more selfless. They crafted all of the Musketeers to be less self-serving. They kind of shifted that to Anthos a little bit, but Anthos' son got murdered, so he's feeling some kind of way. Pretty much all the technical things in this movie were extremely well done. So I loved the music, the sets, the costumes, the acting. I liked that the acting didn't worry too much about accents. Usually when they're doing some kind of a European drama, no matter what country in Europe that the movie is set in, the accent is always formal English, right? It's always like a formal UK accent is like kind of the default. So there are two tracks that directors are going now. They'll either go to the English accent or they'll go no accent at all. So that was the direction that this movie went. And I think I kind of preferred that because like once you get into it, you're not really paying attention to it. And you almost never hear a French accent in real life. You would have to watch a French movie. And even in the French movie, they're just it's not like they're speaking with a French accent. They're speaking French. And so it's like French with subtitles. Or it's like maybe a Frenchman in an American film and they're like the accent that the person is using is part of the plot. It's like either a major plot point or something to make fun of or something of that nature. It's hard for a lot of people to try to imitate. So usually most people don't try to imitate it. It sounds funny when you're trying to fake it. Like if you listen to Gérard Depardieu, when he's speaking, it sounds like a very slight accent. Like in this film, like I'm pretty sure that he could have doubled up on it and sounded really French, but I think he wanted to be on par with the other actors. He didn't want to sound so ridiculous that he was hard to understand. So at least through him and some other actors, you kind of hear what it might have sounded like if the entire cast were speaking in some kind of French accent. But I'm glad they didn't do it. Particularly Leonardo DiCaprio. Not only is his accent very American, but it almost sounds like Western American. It's almost delightful. But when the actors aren't trying to imitate an accent, they can kind of focus on the other aspect of their acting. And that by itself can draw you into the film. As I mentioned before, King Louis XIV was one of France's greatest kings. And here, as a young king, he's depicted as cruel and uncaring and a warmonger. Now, one of those things is absolutely true. The real king really was an absolute warmonger. And in this version of the story, he is at war with the Dutch, but also he's bankrupting France and he's feeding the people rotten food in order for his army to be fed the good food. And the people are on the verge of just rioting, and the king is on the verge of like just shooting a bunch of civilians to quell the people who are rioting. And also he has to contend with the Jesuits trying to murder him because he's bankrupting France. He sends for Aramis. Aramis is a retired musketeer, but he's also a bishop. So he wants Aramis to go undercover and infiltrate the Jesuits to find out who the general of the Jesuits is and to kill the Jesuit general. And in so doing, keeping the king safe. But then later on in the film, you learn plot twist. Aramis is the Jesuit general. It's Aramis who's trying to murder the king. Aramis has had this complicated idea of, at first, I think he was just going to murder the king and have whoever succeed the king. So it'd probably be the queen mother would take over until they find another successor. They never mention the king's actual brother, which is, I mentioned earlier, Philippe, who was Duke of New Orleans. Well, not the Duke of New Orleans. He's a Duke of Orleans. They never mention him, but presumably he could have taken over if the king had died. But I guess in this version of the story, the Duke of Orleans doesn't exist. So when Aramis has a secret meeting, he gets his former musketeer comrades together, including D'Artagnan, even though D'Artagnan works for the king. They actually want him part of the plot of replacing the king, but D'Artagnan is super loyal, doesn't want to do it. And so D'Artagnan basically allows the Musketeers to try to replace the king, but he's basically telling them that if they try, he's going to stop them. And the Musketeers are going to carry on with their plan. One of my favorite scenes in the movie is them actually going to one of the prisons to rescue the man in the iron mask. Like, Aramis knew that there was the man, and he knew about the unknown prisoner or the hidden prisoner, and he knew the identity of the prisoner because he was the one who put him there in the first place. He knows all of this. He knew about the secret king's brother. So that's why he's going to put this plan forward. So instead of trying to murder the king outright, he's going to replace the king with someone who's kinder and gentler. And so there's a scene where they go to the prison. It's all three of them, but I think it's principally Porthos and Aramis who goes to the prison. So Aramis has disguised himself as like a overweight Italian. He's going around, he's speaking Italian to the French guards. He's disguising himself as like some kind of Italian priest or something, and he's supposed to be delivering like religious service to the unknown prisoner. So they get him to the cell of the man with the iron mask. And when the guards go away and Aramis starts to pray for this prisoner, the reason that Aramis appears to be overweight is because he's carrying an entire other body under his massive cloak. So he releases this body, and it's apparently some dead person in an iron mask. And Felipe takes his place. He basically climbs on top of Aramis, and Aramis hides him under his cloak. And so is the same like overweight prisoner. Then Aramis complains that the prisoner is sick, that he's got the plague. And so they guards come, they quickly let Aramis out. He goes back to the boat. They had got to the prison by a boat. There's some kind of like canal that goes through the prison. So he gets to the boat where Porthos is waiting, and then they row away and they escape with the fake king. Well, they escape with the man in the iron mask. But before they leave, Aramis doesn't want discovered that the man in the iron mask that he brought, the false man in the iron mask that he brought to the prison, he doesn't want discovered his identity. So they say, well, this guy has the plague, so we have to burn the body so nobody else gets the plague. So, because the body that Aramis brought was already dead. So some kind of way, they found some poor dead boy, and they put an iron mask on him, and then they brought him to the prison. They laid him in the prison, and then they had his body burned so that no one will ever discover who this unknown boy is. And they escape with Felipe. So another one of my favorite parts is now that they have Felipe, they've got to train Felipe. They've got to teach him and how to be a gentleman. Like, he's been a prisoner for like 6 years. And at first, Felipe doesn't actually want to participate because he doesn't feel like he has been given a proper reason to try to replace his brother as king. And so after being convinced, he goes on, there's a training montage, and you know how we love a training montage. So there's a training montage of Felipe trying to teach him how to be a courtly person. He's trying to be the king himself. And the thing about Felipe is that he's too empathetic, and the empathy that he has towards other people is going to prove to be his downfall. The other thing that you discover is, I kind of like the weird plot twist they have in the movie. So the first plot twist is that Aramis is, in fact, the general of the Jesuits that the king wants to murder. And the other plot twist is that we find out, and they're throwing hints throughout the movie, but we find out that D'Artagnan and Queen Mother Anne are secret lovers. Like, they've been secret lovers for a long time. They see each other in the hallway. They still kisses with each other. At first, it kind of just looks like they just kind of like each other. But then you realize that these two people are having a full-on love affair, or if not a love affair, then they used to have a love affair, but they have separated because the queen doesn't want D'Artagnan to be executed, because if anybody ever found out, that's exactly what would happen. That's one of the things that's going on, is that they're trying to keep their love affair a secret. And then later on in the movie, when the plan comes into fruition, that there's this huge ball that the king is doing. And one of the things that must be done is that at this ball, because it's a masquerade, they want to replace King Louis XIV with his brother, his identical twin brother, Felipe. They want to do the switcheroo at this party. Because they're Musketeers, they know all the secret passageway through the palace and whatnot. They use this knowledge. The thing about the king is that when the false man in the iron mask is burned, they send that message to Felipe. Felipe finds out, his mother finds out, and she's crushed. The iron mask in and of itself kind of freaks Louis out a little bit. So at this party, you have the Musketeers show up, and they're wearing masks. But then under the party mask, it's the type of masquerade mask that is held on top of a wand. And so it's not like on their faces all the time. So whenever one of them is in sight of the king, they would lower the wand down and reveal like an iron mask. And then they would put the wand up. And it's like, so whenever Louis is looking around, he's seeing one of the other party goers are wearing this iron mask, but then they would hide their face again. And so he would say, "Did you see that?" And no one else would see it, because they would only reveal this iron mask to Louis. And that's freaking him out. And so being freaked out, he goes to his room. And then when he gets to his room, that's when the Musketeers, they switch him. They basically, they capture Louis. They strip him of his clothes, of his regalia, and they dress Felipe as the king. And they tell him you just got to go out there and just got to act like the king. Just do what we did in that training montage. And so Felipe goes out there acting like the king, but he's obviously not used to it. So he's showing way too much kindness and courtesy to the people who are there. D'Artagnan sees the king, he sees this, and he clocks right away that the king is acting unusual and that he's not being as cruel or as unkind. One of the things that has happened is that he has this like affair with Christine. Christine was the fiance of Raoul. Raoul is the son of Anthos. Felipe goes to this party that the king is throwing at the beginning of the film. And that's when the king sees Christine. He's smitten by her, and he has this problem. She's connected to Raoul, but Raoul is in the army. He's aspiring to be a musketeer. But because Raoul is in the army and he has this woman that the king wants, the king decides to send Raoul to the front lines where he's likely to be killed in this war that he's already waging. And then while Raoul is at the front lines, he's going to make a move on Raoul's fiance. But Raoul's fiance is always resistant. Like, she's always really resistant to the king's advances. And then when she learns of Raoul's death, the king comforts her. Like, he's doing all of the things. He's giving Christine an apartment in the royal palace. He's taking care of her family so they don't have a want for anything. Also, the king is known for just like going through women. And I think Christine is cognizant of this. But the other thing is that because he's a king, and the king is like, especially in most cultures, it's like ordained by God himself. And so when the king asks for something, it is almost sacrilegious or a sin to refuse the king. It's like disobeying the king is almost the same as disobeying God himself. So if the king wants a woman, the woman kind of has to acquiesce. So there isn't, especially in this film, there really isn't a notion that Christine can refuse the king. You don't really get that feeling. So it's not exactly a consensual relationship. So fast forward when you have Felipe taking over as a king and he's having this ball and this woman comes and she starts crying out against the king. And this woman is Christine. Felipe doesn't know Christine and she doesn't know why Christine is upset and crying against the king. Basically what happened is that she's upset about Raul's death and what the king had to do with it. This whole thing about the king sending some dude to the front line so he can make out with the dude's wife. It's straight out of the Bible. In this case, the king is biblically wrong in his actions. Christine is all upset. She's basically embarrassing the king at this party. And the king, at least Felipe, he doesn't, like I said, he doesn't know her or know why she's upset, but he calms her down. He says that whatever he did, well, whatever she thinks he did wrong, he's going to try to make it right. And all of these things, he's showing a lot of caring and empathy and treating her with kindness. And when D'Artagnan sees all of this, it's like a red flag for D'Artagnan. He knows that something is up. He doesn't know what's going on, but the king is not acting like he's supposed to. He's not being cruel and indifferent. So he starts to do some investigation and he finds that the Musketeers are behind this subterfuge, and there's this whole sequence where he's chasing them, they get trapped, and they end up finding that they have found the king's twin brother. And D'Artagnan suspects this because he knows that the king has a twin brother. He knows the secret. Well, he knew the secret and Aramis knew the secret. Well, he's able to capture Philippe while the three Musketeers get away. And then later, the king he's upset and incensed. He wants to murder Felipe, but D'Artagnan convinces him to just send them back to prison. And this is where one of my favorite things that happened in the movie is where King Louis XIV, he screams, "You will wear that mask until you love it. You will wear it until you die in it." So I thought that was a powerful performance by Leonardo DiCaprio. As a matter of fact, him playing both parts, I like how distinct that they are, these two different characters, one being kind and gentle and one being cruel and vile, really. So the adventure continues where you have the three Musketeers, and by this time D'Artagnan joins the Musketeers and essentially switches sides to rescue Felipe from the prison. And they decide to try again to replace Felipe with the king. And the king is joining his Musketeers to stop the three Musketeers from rescuing Felipe at the prison. And there's this huge, the ending is a little bit messy. The three Musketeers, or I should say the four Musketeers now, they're kind of trapped in the prison, and they have to charge. They're in a situation where they're like in a hallway, and at the end of the hallway are the king and his musketeers, the ones that are loyal to him. And they have muskets. And the only thing that the four musketeers have are their swords. They don't have muskets. But the king's musketeers have muskets. But the thing about it is that the three musketeers and D'Artagnan are legendary. And so they are hesitant to just kill them outright with muskets. So they deliberately aim away from the four musketeers charging at them down this hallway. And so they get hit, but none of them are fatally shot. And then there's this confrontation between the king and Felipe, and the king is trying to stab Felipe, ends up stabbing D'Artagnan instead. It's during this time where D'Artagnan reveals that he's their actual father. He's King Louis XIV and Felipe's father. And that's why he knew all of the secrets. That's why he understood the machinations. That's why when the king was acting funny at this masquerade party, that he knew instantly that it wasn't the king, that it had to be Felipe. I guess seeing the self-sacrifice of the musketeers, the king's guard, they switch on the king and they allow and assist the musketeers in switching the identities. And so Felipe lives out the rest of his life being King Louis XIV of France. And D'Artagnan has died. Now, obviously, in the novel, it's all different. And actually, in the novel, the only living musketeer turns out to be Aramis, the one that was the most selfish of the three of them, or of the four of them. D'Artagnan actually isn't the first to die. D'Artagnan actually, he goes on to, well, in the novel, they never actually switch the king. The king is still King Louis XIV, and Felipe is returned to prison. And to reward D'Artagnan for his loyalty, he's giving more rank and prestige, and he goes off to continue to fight for France. And he is actually killed in action in war, some kind of war or whatever. And the other musketeers die from other adventures, and Aramis is the only one who remains living, but he's outcast from France. He has to go to another place because he did try to depose the king. But anyways, that's the last main difference between the book and the movie. In the movie, it's much more of a feel-good ending. You have the noble sacrifice of D'Artagnan and the end of his story, and the three musketeers become the king's guard, or like his trusted advisors. And Felipe, disguised as King Louis XIV, goes on to become one of France's greatest kings. So that's how that turned out. And I thought it's not my favorite movie. I want to admit that it's not my favorite movie. The movie kind of drags a little bit, and it's even though it's simplified from what the book is doing, it's still a little bit complicated. But for the most part, I thought it was very decently done. And now that we've talked about our favorite part, let's get into a little bit of trivia. Now, I only have 3 bits of trivia that I got from IMDb. Anyway, the 3 bits of trivia that I found interesting. So, for the first one, each of the 4 musketeers are played by actors with different nationalities. Jeremy Irons is English, John Malkovich is American, Gérard Depardieu is French, and Gabriel Byrne is Irish, which is a nice international flavor. Is a nice mix of cast. Even though Gabriel Byrne, in the role of D'Artagnan, is supposed to be much younger than the older musketeers, Byrne, Jeremy Irons, and Gérard Depardieu are in fact almost the same age. Irons and Depardieu were both born in 1948. Byrne was born in 1950. John Malkovich was born in 1953, making him the actual youngest of the four men. Interestingly enough, he affects an older man because in the movie he appears to be balding. And it seems like whenever I see Malkovich in the movies, he's either bald or near bald. And in this film, he looks appropriately aged. I don't know if he's wearing a wig that's made to look like he's balding, or that he was already bald, or they applied a wig in such a way that he would look bald. I'm not sure, but he definitely does his job at looking like an old man. Now on to the last bit of trivia that I found interesting. MGM discovered the audience the movie attracted was directly related to the appeal of Leonardo DiCaprio, being 55% female and 46% under the age of 25, which is great because it seems like that's right around Leonardo DiCaprio's purview. he all the way from back then to all of these years later, 25 is about where he likes to sit. And that's it for the trivia. Let's check out what the critics thought. The critics have it at 32%. The audience is 55% on Rotten Tomatoes, and IMDb Reviews has it at 6.5 out of 10. Mike Clark of USA Today wrote, "To these non-teen ears and eyes, the kid is no more real in either guise than his phony flowing locks, and the romantic scenes fizzle next to Titanic's steamy roll in the Rolls Royce. But the thing is, I am not exactly sure that those scenes with Louis XIV and Christine are supposed to be steamy. As a matter of fact, it comes off as icky. What's the word that they use now? The ick is what they say nowadays. That is a kind of scene that gives you the ick, because what you have is a king that can't be denied, and he's moving on somebody who really wants to be with somebody else. And he's not in love with this woman as more as he's in love with what she can do for him. Like, he desires her as an object, not because he likes her for who she is. For him, she's just a sexual object to be used and discarded after he's done with her. So I don't, and then she doesn't really want to be with him. She really wants to be with Felipe, but like Felipe was killed. And now it's almost like she's forced to be with him. So it would seem to me that it's not supposed to be a steamy love affair. It really is designed to make you uncomfortable. So I think Mark is misinterpreting what that whole scene is supposed to be. And the last critic we have is Pablo Valaca. I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, and I apologize. And it's from Cinema M. Cena. This was translated from another language, and I'm not sure what language it's translated from, but according to the translation, what Pablo wrote was, "Luckily for Randall Wallace, the material he was working with was too good to be ruined. Alexander Dumas saved the film," and that, I think, is a fair statement. Finally, The Man in the Iron Mask is, as of this recording, available on Amazon Prime. Join us next time, where as I check out another military drama and another story with historical figures. This story will be a little more recent as it dramatizes the Battle of Stalingrad. Join me for the conversation about the World War II drama, Enemy at the Gates. You can follow us on Blue Sky, Threads, TikTok, Instagram, and sometimes Twitter at Backlook Cinema. Please contact us with any questions, comments, or suggestions at friends@backlookcinema. Please rate and review on your favorite podcast app, and if you're listening on YouTube, please like or subscribe or leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. One last time, if you like this show, then please help us grow by spreading the word about Backlook Cinema, the podcast. Believe me, it matters. I've been Zoe Richardson. Be safe, share a movie from yesteryear with your family, hug your loved ones, and if you're gonna be anything, be empathetic, be kind, be helpful. be outstanding.